This 4-year-old beggar girl is burned with a hot griddle in a public square, but a millionaire saw everything and does something that shocks everyone. Comment on what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The scream cut through the humid afternoon air of July in Harmony Creek, Ohio, like a sharp knife, making everyone in the town square stop and turn towards the sound. It was a different scream from the usual noises of commerce, the street vendors hawking their wares, or the children playing. It was a scream of pure, desperate pain that made the blood of those who heard it run cold. Lily, only 6 years old, was lying on the hot sidewalk, clutching her right arm to her chest as tears streamed down her dirty face. Beside her, a still smouldering griddle marked the concrete, leaving a pungent smell of burnt metal in the air. The man responsible for the girl's scream, a middle-aged hot dog vendor with a red face, still held the spatula he had used to take the griddle off the heat. "I told this kid to get out of here. She's bothering my customers," he shouted, completely ignoring the child's condition. "Beggars got to stay away from my stand." People around backed away uncomfortably, some shaking their heads in disapproval, others pretending they saw nothing. That's how it worked in the small town. Everyone saw everything, but few had the courage to get involved. Lily remained on the ground, her burned skin beginning to form a red, shiny blister in the exact shape of the hot griddle. Richard Harding had parked his imported car a few feet away to buy water at a nearby store when he heard the scream. Tall, well-dressed, his 52 years carrying the posture of someone who had succeeded in life, he would normally have walked right past a scene like that. After all, street problems weren't his concern. His clothing company had thrived in recent years. His mansion in the upscale neighborhood of Oakwood was the envy of many, and he had learned early on that involvement with the poor only brought complications. But something in that scream made him stop. Maybe it was the girl's age, so small and helpless. Maybe it was the brutality of what he had just witnessed, or maybe it was something deeper, a distant memory of when he himself had been a vulnerable child in a cruel world. Without thinking about what he was doing, Richard approached the scene. "What the hell happened here?" he asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The hot dog vendor, who had returned to his work as if nothing had happened, looked up irritably. "Oh, you didn't see. This little beggar wouldn't stop bothering my customers. I warned her several times to get out of here. Today, I decided to teach her a lesson." "A lesson?" Richard's voice was lower, more dangerous. "You burned a 6-year-old child, and you call that a lesson? She shouldn't be here. A beggar doesn't belong in the town square." Richard knelt beside Lily, who looked at him with a mixture of fear and hope. The burn on her arm was ugly, deep, and would certainly require urgent medical attention. But what caught his attention most were the girl's eyes, large, dark, filled with a sadness that no child should know. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Lily," the girl whispered, still sobbing. "Where's your mom, Lily?" The girl pointed to a bench in the shade of a tree where a thin woman was sleeping soundly, oblivious to her daughter's cries. Richard could smell the alcohol, even from a distance. Brenda, 28 years old, looked twice her age, destroyed by the addiction that had consumed her for years. "Let's take care of that burn," Richard said, taking a clean handkerchief from his pocket and carefully wrapping it around the girl's arm. "You're going to be okay." As he helped Lily to her feet, Richard felt the curious stares of the people around him. He knew that by the end of the day, the whole town would be talking about the rich businessman who had stopped to help a street girl. He also knew that his wife, Deborah, wouldn't be happy when she found out. "I need to take you to the hospital," he said to Lily, who followed him without question. There was something in his voice that conveyed safety, something she hadn't felt in a long time. When they reached the bench where Brenda was sleeping, Richard shook her gently. The woman woke up startled, her eyes red and confused. "What? Who are you?" Your daughter was attacked. She needs urgent medical attention. Brenda took a few seconds to process the information, looking at Lily's bandaged arm. When she finally understood what had happened, her face contorted in a mixture of despair and guilt. "I don't have money for a hospital," she murmured, lowering her head in shame. "I'll pay," Richard said without hesitation, surprising even himself. "Let's go." During the drive to Harmony Creek General Hospital, Lily quietly hummed a melody that Richard couldn't identify, but that stirred something deep in his memory. It was a sad but beautiful song, sung with a pure voice that contrasted sharply with all the brutality she had just suffered. As he drove, Richard wondered what he was doing. Why had he gotten involved? Why was he paying for the treatment of a child he didn't even know? He, who had always been so calculating, so focused on his own interests, now found himself in a situation completely outside his comfort zone. At the hospital, while Lily received first aid, Richard noticed how she continued to hum the same melody, as if the music was her refuge from the pain. There was something mesmerizing in that small voice, something that transported him to places he had buried long ago in his memory. "Where did you learn that song?" he asked, when the nurse finished bandaging her arm. "My mum sings it to me when I have nightmares," Lily replied simply. At that moment, something changed irrevocably in Richard Harding's life. He didn't yet fully understand what was happening, but he knew that he couldn't simply forget that girl with sad eyes who turned pain into music. Richard's mansion in the Oakwood neighborhood was a status symbol in Harmony Creek, with its 3 stories, swimming pool, and impeccably maintained garden. When he arrived home that night, he still carried the smell of the hospital and the image of Lily etched in his mind. Deborah was waiting for him in the living room, flipping through a home decor magazine, her 45 years maintained with care through expensive treatments and exclusive gyms. "You're late," she said without looking up from the magazine. "Dinner's cold." Richard poured himself a whiskey and sat in the Italian leather armchair, still processing the day's events. "I had an unexpected situation." "What kind of situation?" For a moment, Richard hesitated. He had known his wife for 15 years of marriage and knew exactly what her reaction would be. Deborah had grown up in an upper-middle-class family and had always had a horror of poverty, as if it were something contagious that could contaminate her carefully constructed life. "I helped a child who was attacked in the town square." Deborah finally looked up, a wrinkle of concern appearing between her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. "Attacked how?" "A hot dog vendor burned her arm with a hot griddle, a 6-year-old girl." "That's awful." Deborah shook her head, but Richard realized that her concern was more with the implications for them than with the child's suffering. "I hope you called the police and didn't get directly involved." "I took her to the hospital." The silence that followed was tense. Deborah closed the magazine and looked directly at him. "You took a street girl to the hospital?" "Richard, for God's sake, do you know what kind of problems that can bring?" "What kind of problems, Deborah? Helping an injured child?" "Legal, social, financial problems. These people are experts at taking advantage of other people's kindness. Tomorrow, the girl's mother will be at the door of your company asking for money. Then she'll make up that you did something inappropriate. She'll sue." Richard took a sip of whiskey, feeling the liquid burn his throat. "Her mother could barely stand from drinking so much. She won't sue anyone. Even worse, a desperate alcoholic is capable of anything for money." In the following days, Richard discovered that he couldn't get Lily out of his head. During meetings at his clothing factory, while analyzing production spreadsheets and talking to suppliers, his mind wandered to the little girl who sang to ward off pain. He had left his card with the hospital nurse, asking to be informed about Lily's condition. The call came 3 days later. The burn was healing well, but Lily had developed an infection that would require more expensive antibiotics. Brenda had no way to pay, and the public hospital didn't have the medication in stock. Without hesitation, Richard headed to the hospital. He found Lily in a small bed in the pediatric ward, thinner than he remembered, but with the same large, expressive eyes. When she saw him, her face lit up with a smile that made something tighten in his chest. "Mister," she said, using the respectful form of address that kids give adults. "You came back." "Of course I came back. How are you feeling?" "My arm hurts, but I sing and the pain goes away." To demonstrate, she began humming the same melody from the previous week, but this time Richard paid closer attention. There was something familiar about that song, something that stirred buried memories. Brenda was sitting in a chair next to the bed, visibly sober and ashamed. Her hair was combed, and she had made an effort to present herself better. "Mr. Harding," she said, getting up quickly, "thank you so much for helping my daughter. I don't know how I'm going to pay you." "You don't have to pay anything. How is she?" "The doctors said she needs a stronger medicine, but it's very expensive. I tried to get it at the discount pharmacy, but—" Richard was already pulling out his wallet. "How much does it cost?" $300, Brenda murmured, as if it were an impossible fortune. For Richard, $300 was what he spent on a single meal at expensive restaurants. He handed over the money without hesitation, but noticed how Brenda received it with trembling hands, tears in her eyes. "Lily," he said, turning his attention to the girl, "that song you sing, who taught it to you?" "My mom. She says it's an old song that her grandma used to sing." A vague memory stirred in Richard's mind. His own mother, Eleanor, who had passed away when he was 15, used to hum something similar while cooking. But that was impossible, just a coincidence. During the following week, Richard found himself returning to the hospital daily. Officially, he was just checking on Lily's recovery progress. In reality, he was fascinated by the girl. She had a sharp intelligence hidden beneath the poverty, asked insightful questions about everything around her, and above all, had a musical talent that was impossible to ignore. "Have you ever thought about learning to play an instrument?" he asked on one of those visits. Lily's eyes lit up. "I'd like to play the piano, but I've never seen one up close." "Maybe one day you will." It was at that moment that Deborah appeared in the doorway of the room. Richard hadn't seen her arrive, and the expression on her face was one of pure, contained fury. She had dressed impeccably for the occasion, as she always did when she wanted to make an impression. "Richard, I need to talk to you. Now." He said goodbye to Lily and followed his wife into the hospital corridor, where she exploded in furious whispers. "You're coming here every single day, Richard. Do you know what people are saying?" "No, and I don't care. They're saying that you're having an affair with the girl's mother, that you're supporting an entire family of beggars. Yesterday, Barbara called me asking if it was true that you were spending fortunes on strangers." Barbara was Deborah's sister and a social worker for the city, known for her venomous tongue and tendency to meddle in other people's lives. "Barbara has nothing to do with this." "Yes, she does. She works with children, Richard. If she wants, she can report you for inappropriate behavior. A rich married man visiting a poor child every day? How do you think that's going to look?" Richard felt a cold rage rising in his chest. "Are you insinuating that I'm not insinuating anything. I'm saying that other people will insinuate, and our reputation will go down the drain." That night, Richard stayed up late, looking out of his bedroom window at the city lights. Deborah slept beside him, seemingly at peace after making her position clear. But he couldn't forget the sparkle in Lily's eyes when she talked about playing the piano. The next day, he made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going to the hospital, he went to a music store in downtown Harmony Creek. When he left, he had bought a small but good-quality electronic keyboard. When he delivered the gift to Lily, he saw something he didn't expect, tears of joy in the girl's eyes. "Is this really for me?" she asked, touching the keys with reverence. "It's yours." Lily began to experiment with the instrument, and to everyone's surprise in the room, in just a few minutes she was reproducing the melody she always hummed. Not perfectly, but with a musical intuition that was clearly natural. It was at that moment that Richard realized that he had crossed a line of no return. He was no longer just helping an injured child. He was getting emotionally involved in a way that he didn't fully understand but felt was inevitable. 2 weeks after Lily's discharge from the hospital, Richard discovered where the mother and daughter lived. The address that Brenda had given was in the neighborhood of Willow Creek, an area known for its wooden shacks and unpaved streets. When he arrived at the location, he found a scene that exceeded his worst expectations. Lily's house was a precarious construction of plywood and leaky asbestos tiles, sharing space with other families in a kind of makeshift tenement. The smell of open sewage mixed with wood stove smoke, creating a suffocating atmosphere. Barefoot children played in the mud formed by the previous night's rain, and adults looked suspiciously at the imported car parked at the entrance of the alley. Lily was sitting on a broken plastic chair outside the shack with the keyboard on her lap, trying to play a song she had learned on her own. When she saw Richard approaching, her face lit up with that smile that he had already learned to value more than any successful deal. "Mr. Harding, look what I learned." She played a simple melody, but executed with a feeling that sent shivers down his spine. It was the same song she always hummed, now coming to life through the black and white keys. "That's very beautiful, Lily. Where did you learn to play like that?" "Nobody taught me. I keep trying until it comes out just like the music in my head." Brenda came out of the shack, visibly embarrassed by the precarious conditions in which they lived. She had made an effort to tidy herself up, but it was impossible to hide the reality of the extreme poverty that surrounded them. "Mr. Harding, I'm sorry you had to come all the way here. I know it's not a place for someone like you." "It's okay, Brenda. I came to see how you were doing." The answer was obvious before his eyes. They weren't just doing badly, they were barely surviving. Richard could see through the half-open door of the shack that there was no furniture beyond 2 thin mattresses on the floor and some pots stacked in a corner. "Is Lily eating properly?" he asked, noticing how the girl had lost weight since her discharge from the hospital. Brenda lowered her eyes. "We get by as we can. Sometimes we have it, sometimes we don't." At that moment, Richard made a decision that he knew would bring serious consequences for his marriage. "Brenda, I want to make a proposal. I'm going to rent a better house for you in a safer neighborhood, and I'm going to provide regular food." Brenda's eyes filled with tears. "Sir, I can't accept that. You've already done so much for us." "Yes, you can. And you will." During the following days, Richard found himself completely absorbed in organizing the move. He found a small but decent house in the West Side neighborhood, with 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with a shower, and a functional kitchen. He provided basic furniture, a refrigerator, a stove, and filled the pantry with food. Lily was ecstatic with the new house, especially when she discovered that she would have a room just for her, where she could play her keyboard without bothering anyone. "It's like a palace," she said, running from one room to another with a joy that was contagious. But the reaction at home was devastating. Deborah discovered about the expenses when she saw the bank transfer receipts that Richard had left on the office desk. $15,000, she shouted, waving the papers in the air. "You spent $15,000 on a family of beggars? They're not beggars. They're people who need help." "Richard, have you completely lost your mind? $15,000. That's more than many families earn in a year. And that's exactly why it makes a difference for them." Deborah threw herself on the couch, her hands covering her face. "You don't understand what you're doing. People are already talking, Richard. Yesterday at the club, 3 of my friends came to ask me if it was true that you were supporting a mistress and her daughter. So you explained that it's nothing like that." I explained, but they didn't believe me. A married woman doesn't explain why her husband is spending fortunes on other women, Richard. That only confirms the suspicions. It was then that Barbara arrived unannounced, using her spare house key as she always did. Deborah's sister had the same fair skin tone and the same blonde hair, but where Deborah cultivated elegance, Barbara emanated an intimidating authority that came from her years working with troubled families. "We need to talk," she said without greetings. "All three of us." Barbara poured herself a coffee and sat at the kitchen table as if she owned the house. "Richard, you know I've been working in child protective services for 10 years. I've seen it all in this field, and I can guarantee you that what you're doing is dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "A rich, married man with no children who suddenly develops an obsession with a poor girl? You know how that sounds?" Richard felt the anger rise like a red wave. "Obsession? I'm helping a child who was attacked. You're creating an emotional dependency, both yours and hers. And that can turn into a very ugly situation very quickly." "What situation?" Barbara leaned forward, lowering her voice. "If someone reports you to Child Protective Services for inappropriate behavior with a minor, your life will turn into a living hell. Even if you're completely innocent, the process will last for years. Your company will suffer, your marriage will end, and you'll be marked forever." "Who would make such a report?" The silence that followed was loaded with meaning. Deborah avoided his gaze, nervously fiddling with her wedding ring. Barbara maintained a neutral, professional expression. "Anyone concerned about the well-being of the child," Barbara said finally. "Or someone who believes you have ulterior motives." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He stayed in the office until late, thinking about the conversation with Barbara and the implications of her words. She was right about one thing. His connection with Lily had become something deeper than simple charity. But it wasn't anything inappropriate as she had insinuated. It was something different, something he couldn't yet define completely. The next day he went to visit Lily at the new house. He found her sitting in the small backyard, playing a song on the keyboard while watching a robin that had landed on a cherry tree. The scene was so peaceful, so pure, that it made all the stress of the last few days disappear momentarily. "What song is that, Lily?" "I made it up for the robin. I think he liked it because he didn't fly away." Richard sat down next to her on the grass. "How can you make up songs like that?" "The songs are already inside my head. I just need to find them." Lily stopped playing and looked at him with her big, serious eyes. "Mr. Harding, why do you take care of us?" The question caught him off guard. It was something he himself had been questioning for weeks. "Because you need to be taken care of." "But there are a lot of people who need it. Why us in particular?" Richard was silent for a moment, looking for an answer that made sense even to himself. "Sometimes we find special people in life, Lily. People who make us want to be a better person. Like in the song my mom sings. She says it's about people who meet when they need each other." Again, that feeling of familiarity stirred within him. "Can you sing it for me?" Lily began to sing, her clear voice echoing through the small backyard. It was a song about loneliness, about lost people who meet and help each other find their way home. And as she sang, Richard felt an inexplicable emotion grow in his chest. He knew that song. He was absolutely certain that he knew it, even if he couldn't remember from where. The Harding and Cummer clothing factory had been Richard's lifelong dream, but lately he could barely concentrate on business. His mind constantly wandered to Lily, to her musical evolution, and to that disturbing feeling that there was something deeper connecting their lives than a simple coincidence. On that Tuesday morning, while reviewing production reports, his cell phone rang. It was Brenda, and her voice was trembling with panic. "Mr. Harding, I need your help. Lily has disappeared." Richard's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, disappeared?" "She left this morning to buy bread at the corner bakery and hasn't come back. I've looked everywhere she knows." "I'm desperate." Richard cancelled all the day's meetings and rushed to the West Side neighborhood. He found Brenda walking through the streets, shouting her daughter's name, visibly desperate. Neighbors joined the search, and soon half the neighborhood was looking for the 6-year-old girl. "She's never done this before." Brenda repeated between tears. Lily always obeys me, always comes back quickly when she goes out alone. It was then that a woman who lived 2 houses down approached them. Are you looking for the girl with the keyboard? Yes. Have you seen her? I saw her leaving with a blonde woman in a car about 2 hours ago. I thought it was strange because the girl didn't seem to want to go. Richard felt his stomach churn. A blonde woman. It could be a coincidence, but something in the back of his mind already knew it wasn't. What kind of car? A silver sedan. A nice one. The woman was dressed like those doctors who work at City Hall. Barbara. Richard was absolutely certain that it was her, and he ran to the car without giving explanations to anyone. During the drive to City Hall, his cell phone rang several times, but he ignored the calls. His mind was focused on one thing: finding Lily. Harmony Creek. City Hall was an old building in the center of town, with dark corridors and cramped rooms that smelled of old paper and disinfectant. Richard knew the way to the social services department, where Barbara had her office. He found the door closed, but he could hear voices inside. One of them was unmistakably Lily's high-pitched voice, and she sounded scared. "Barbara!" he shouted, banging on the door forcefully. "Open this door now!" The silence that followed was tense. After a few seconds, Barbara opened the door, keeping only a crack. Her clothes were impeccable as always, but there was something in her eyes that Richard had never seen before, a hardness that bordered on cruelty. "Richard, I'm glad you came. We need to talk. Where's Lily?" "She's safe." "Come in, please." Richard pushed the door open and entered the room. Lily was sitting in a chair on the other side of the table, her eyes red from crying. When she saw him, she tried to get up, but Barbara gestured for her to remain seated. "Mr. Harding," the girl cried. "She said you told her to pick me up, but I didn't want to come." "Nobody said anything, Lily." "Barbara, what does this mean?" Barbara closed the door and positioned herself between Richard and the girl. "It means I'm doing my job. I received an anonymous report about inappropriate behavior of an adult in relation to this child." "What report? Who made it?" "That's confidential. But I can tell you that there are suspicions that you're using your financial position to manipulate a vulnerable family." Richard felt the anger explode in his chest. "Manipulate? I'm helping them have a decent life. You're creating a psychological and financial dependency. And that can be considered a form of abuse. That's ridiculous, and you know it." Barbara sat down behind the table, assuming an official posture. "Lily, can you tell me how your friendship with Mr. Harding began?" The girl looked confused between the two adults. "He helped me when the bad man burned me, took me to the hospital. And after that? He came to visit me, gave me a keyboard, helped us move to the new house." "Lily," Barbara interrupted, "has Mr. Harding ever asked you to do something that made you uncomfortable? Something that you thought was strange?" Lily's eyes widened. "No, he just teaches me about music and tells me stories." "Barbara, this has gone too far," Richard said, struggling to keep his voice controlled. "You're traumatizing a child with your sick insinuations." "I'm protecting a child, and if you really care about her well-being, you'll step away and let professionals handle the situation." "What professionals? You?" "I'm going to recommend that Lily be placed in foster care while we investigate the mother's suitability as a caregiver. A woman with a history of alcoholism shouldn't have custody of a child." It was as if the ground had disappeared from under Richard's feet. "You can't do that." "Yes, I can. And I will." Lily began to cry loudly. "I want to go home. I want my mom. Mr. Harding, take me home." Barbara stood up and walked to the window, turning her back to them. "Richard, you have 2 options. You walk away from this family completely and I forget this story, or I proceed with the official process and I can guarantee it will be very unpleasant for everyone involved. That's blackmail. That's child protection." At that moment, the door opened abruptly and Brenda ran in, breathless and desperate. "Lily, my daughter!" The girl ran into her mother's arms, and both began to cry together. Seeing that scene of despair made something break inside Richard. "Barbara, I want to talk to you in private," he said, indicating the hallway. Outside the room, away from the ears of Lily and Brenda, Richard confronted his sister-in-law with a coldness she didn't expect. "What do you really want?" Barbara crossed her arms. "I want you to stop destroying my sister's marriage." "What do you mean?" "Deborah hasn't slept in weeks. She cries in secret. She's taking sedatives. Your spending on this family is destroying the stability of the couple, and as her sister, I won't allow it." "So all this talk about child protection is a lie." "It's not a lie. Your behavior is genuinely questionable. But my main motivation is to protect my sister." Richard took a deep breath, trying to control the fury. "And if I continue to help Lily, then tomorrow I'll open an official process. I'm going to allege that you're using your position of power to manipulate a vulnerable family. I'm going to question Brenda's ability as a mother. And I'm going to make sure that Lily is placed in foster care while all this is resolved. That could take months. It could take years." The silence in the hallway was broken only by the muffled sound of Lily's crying coming from the room. Richard looked through the glass of the door and saw the girl clinging to her mother, both trembling with fear and confusion. "You're using an innocent child as a weapon in a war that isn't hers," he said quietly. "You started this war when you decided to meddle where you weren't called." At that moment, Richard realized that he was facing something much more complex than he had imagined. It wasn't just about helping a child in need. It was about power, control, and the unforeseen consequences of his choices. When they returned to the room, Lily ran to him. "Mr. Harding, please don't let them take me away from my mom." Looking into the girl's desperate eyes, Richard knew he had reached the most difficult moment of his life. Any decision he made would have devastating consequences for someone he loved. The decision Richard made that day at City Hall would haunt him for months to come. Looking at Lily clinging to Brenda's legs, he made the only choice he believed could protect her. He backed down. "Barbara is right," he said, the words coming out like shards of glass from his throat. "Maybe I've gotten too involved. It's better if I step away." The look on Lily's face when she heard those words was like a stab in the heart. Confusion, hurt, and abandonment mixed in her dark eyes, and she let go of her mother's hand to approach him. "Mr. Harding, don't you want to be my friend anymore?" Richard knelt down to be at her level, fighting the urge to hug her and run away from that place. "Lily, you're going to be okay. Your mum will take care of you. But what about the music lessons you promised? And the piano you said you were going to show me?" Each word from the girl was torture, but Richard kept his face impassive. "You can learn on your own." "You're very smart." Brenda watched the scene in silence, her eyes alternating between Richard and Barbara, trying to understand what was really happening. There was a sharp intelligence behind her apparent simplicity, and she realized that there were forces at play that escaped her comprehension. In the weeks that followed, Richard tried to return to his normal routine, but he found it impossible. Lily's absence in his life was like a black hole that sucked all his energy and motivation. He arrived early at the factory and left late, immersing himself in work in a desperate attempt not to think about the girl. Deborah noticed the change, but interpreted it incorrectly. "I'm glad you're back to normal," she said one night while they were dining in silence. "I was getting worried about your obsession with that family." "It wasn't obsession," Richard murmured, pushing the food around on his plate without appetite. "Yes, it was. But now that it's over, we can go back to being happy." Happy. The word sounded strange to Richard. Had he been happy before meeting Lily, or just satisfied, settled into a comfortable but empty life devoid of real meaning? It was during one of those melancholy nights that Richard decided to clean out the attic of the mansion in an attempt to keep his hands busy. Among dusty boxes and old furniture, he found something that changed everything: a small trunk that had belonged to his mother Eleanor. Inside the trunk were old photographs, some letters, and at the bottom a small notebook with his mother's delicate handwriting. They were lyrics of songs she had written over the years, some with melodies noted in a rudimentary way. Richard flipped through the notebook with a heavy heart, remembering the gentle woman who had raised him alone after his father abandoned them. Eleanor had worked as a housekeeper her entire life to support her son, always humming while doing the housework. It was on page 15 that he saw something that made his blood run cold. There, written in his mother's careful handwriting, was the same song that Lily always sang. Word for word, verse for verse, exactly the same. With trembling hands, Richard continued reading. There were notes in the margins indicating where his mother had worked over the years, and in one of them it was written, Mendonça Family Home, 1985 to 1987, taught the songs to the little girl, Lucinda. Lucinda. Richard vaguely remembered his mother mentioning an employer who had a young daughter, a girl who loved to hear the songs that Eleanor sang. But what would be the connection with Lily? The next day, driven by an urgency he couldn't explain, Richard went to the house where he had installed Brenda and Lily. He parked across the street and watched from afar, just to make sure they were okay. What he saw left him alarmed. The house was visibly more deteriorated, the plants in the small garden were withered, and there was an atmosphere of abandonment that didn't exist when he still visited them regularly. It was then that he saw Brenda leave the house staggering, clearly drunk, even though it was the middle of the afternoon. She headed to a bar on the corner, leaving Lily alone. Richard waited a few minutes and then got out of the car. He found Lily sitting in the backyard with the keyboard on her lap, but she wasn't playing. She was just looking at the instrument with a deep sadness that broke his heart. Lily! The girl looked up, and for a moment her face lit up. But soon the expression closed, as if she were protecting herself from another disappointment. "You came back," she said without getting up. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine." But it was obvious that she wasn't. Lily had lost weight, her clothes were dirty, and there was a faded quality in her eyes that didn't exist before. "Why aren't you playing?" "I don't feel like it." Richard sat down next to her on the grass. "Can I hear a song?" "I don't remember the songs anymore." "Of course you remember. They're in here," he said, gently touching the girl's chest. "Songs are never lost." Lily looked at him with a mixture of hope and distrust. "Are you going to leave again?" The simple question carried a pain that Richard wasn't prepared to face. "Lily, I need to tell you something about your favorite song, the one that your mom taught you." "What about it?" "My mother also sang that song. She worked as a housekeeper when I was little, and one of her employers had a daughter who loved to hear her sing." Lily frowned. "How can it be the same song? Was your grandmother named Lucinda?" The girl's eyes widened. "How do you know? Mom always talks about Grandma Lucinda, who died when I was a baby." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in Richard's mind. His mother had taught the songs to Lucinda, who in turn had taught them to Brenda, who finally passed them on to Lily. There was no blood tie, but there was something much deeper, a cultural and emotional heritage that spanned generations. "Lily, your grandmother Lucinda learned those songs from my mother Eleanor. That means our families have known each other for a long time, even without us knowing." The girl processed this information with the seriousness that children reserve for great revelations. "So you're like family?" "In a way, yes." It was at that moment that Brenda returned home, visibly altered by alcohol. When she saw Richard, her expression hardened. "What are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to stay away from us?" "Brenda, we need to talk. We have nothing to talk about. You disappeared, remember? You left us alone." The bitterness in her voice was palpable, and Richard realized that his decision to step away had caused much greater damage than he had imagined. Brenda felt abandoned and betrayed, and had returned to drinking as a way to cope with the pain. "I can explain. You don't need to explain anything. I got the message. Rich doesn't mix with poor. It was stupid of me to believe that you really cared. Lily watched the discussion in silence, her eyes going from one adult to the other, trying to understand the complexities that were destroying the little stability she had found in her life. That night, Richard returned home with absolute certainty. He could no longer live pretending that Lily and Brenda didn't exist. Regardless of the consequences, regardless of Barbara's threats, he needed to do what was right. He found Deborah in the living room, watching television, and sat next to her on the couch. "Deborah, I need to tell you about a discovery I made today." She lowered the volume of the TV, sensing that it would be a serious conversation. "What discovery?" "About the song that Lily sings. I discovered that my mother taught that song to her grandmother decades ago." Deborah sighed, annoyed. "Richard, you promised you wouldn't get involved with this story anymore." "I can't keep that promise." The silence that followed was loaded with tension. Deborah turned off the television and turned to face him completely. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means I'm going to go back to helping them no matter what." Deborah's reaction was explosive. She stood up from the couch as if she had received an electric shock, her green eyes shining with a fury that Richard had rarely seen in 15 years of marriage. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." "Richard, you've lost your mind. Barbara made it very clear what will happen if you continue with this obsession. Do you want to destroy our life because of a girl who isn't even related to you?" "Deborah, the connection between our families is real. Your mother has been dead for over 20 years. Stop making up excuses to justify behavior that is destroying our marriage." Deborah began to walk around the room like a caged animal, her hands gesturing violently. "Do you know how much money we've already spent on this family? Over $30,000. $30,000 that we could have used to travel, to renovate the house for our life. Money that completely changed their lives and ruined ours. Yesterday I found Connie at the supermarket, and she didn't even look at me. The friends from the club have stopped inviting me to lunch. Everyone in town is commenting on the married man who abandoned his wife for a beggar and her daughter." Richard felt a dangerous calm descend upon him. "Is that what you really think, that I abandoned you?" "What else can I think? You spend more time thinking about that girl than about me. When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about Lily? When was the last time you gave me attention, like you did before this obsession started?" The question hit Richard hard, because he knew there was truth in it. Since meeting Lily, his relationship with Deborah had gradually deteriorated. But it wasn't because of obsession. It was because he had discovered that there was something much more meaningful in life than the superficial comfort they shared. "Deborah, you don't understand. Lily made me realize what? That our life isn't enough for you? That I'm not enough?" The tears in Deborah's eyes were real, and for the first time, Richard saw beyond her anger. There was fear there. Genuine fear of being abandoned, that 16 years of life together meant less to him than a few months of knowing a child. "It's not about you not being enough. It's about me having found a purpose that goes beyond making money and maintaining appearances." "A purpose, Richard? You have a company, employees who depend on you, a wife who loves you. Isn't that purpose enough?" That night, neither of them could sleep. Richard stayed in the office until late, looking at photographs of his mother and rereading the songs from the notebook. Deborah locked herself in the master bedroom, talking on the phone with Barbara until almost midnight. The next day, Richard made a decision that he knew would be irreversible. He called Brenda. "Brenda, it's Richard. Can we meet this afternoon?" Her voice on the other end of the line was cautious. "What for?" "I need to explain why I stepped away. And I need to make some things right." The meeting was scheduled at a simple diner in the center of town, away from the curious glances of the neighborhoods where they both lived. Brenda arrived punctually, but she carried on her face a hardness that didn't exist before. "Tell me quickly what you want. I left Lily with a neighbor, but I can't be long. Richard took a deep breath and told her everything. About Barbara's threats, about the emotional blackmail, about his discovery of the musical connection between their families. Brenda listened in silence, her expression gradually changing from anger to understanding. So you didn't abandon me because you got tired of us? Never. I stepped away because I thought it was the only way to protect Lily. But I was wrong. Brenda stirred the coffee she had ordered thoughtfully. Mr. Harding, I know you have good intentions, but this war that you rich people live among yourselves can't harm my daughter. It won't harm her. I'll be careful to make sure that doesn't happen. How? Richard had thought about it all night. I'll be more discreet. Instead of direct help, I'll create a savings account in Lily's name for her future, and I'll pay for private music lessons, but away from the city. And your wife? And her sister? Leave it to me. When Richard arrived home that afternoon, he found Barbara waiting in the living room along with Deborah. The two women were sitting side by side on the couch, a united front against him. Richard, Barbara said without preamble, I heard you were seen with Brenda today. I was. That's very disappointing. I thought we had reached an agreement. Richard poured himself a whiskey, noticing how his hands were steady despite the tension. We did. You said that if I stepped away from the family, you would forget the story. But you didn't say that I couldn't help in other ways. Barbara and Deborah exchanged a meaningful look. What other ways? Deborah asked. That's none of your business. It was then that Barbara showed her true colors. Richard, you're not understanding the gravity of the situation. Just today I received an anonymous call reporting that you were seen in suspicious locations with an alcoholic woman and her minor daughter. Anonymous call. From someone concerned about the well-being of the child. Richard looked directly at Deborah. Did you make that call? Deborah looked away but didn't deny it. I did what I thought was necessary to protect our family. The betrayal hit Richard like a punch in the stomach. His own wife had joined forces with her sister to destroy any possibility of him helping Lily. Barbara, he said, his voice dangerously low, I want to make one thing very clear. If you do anything to harm Lily or Brenda, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Barbara stood up, her professional posture poorly masking the satisfaction she felt at having pushed Richard to the limit. Richard, you have until tomorrow to make a final decision. Either you completely cut ties with this family, or I'll sue you for harassment and abuse of power against a minor. After she left, Deborah tried to approach Richard, but he stepped away. Richard, I only did this because I love you. I don't want to see you destroying your life because of an obsession. Deborah, you just betrayed me in the worst possible way. You used an innocent child as a weapon in a war that you yourself created. I didn't create any war. You decided that a street girl was more important than your wife. It's not about being more important. It's about doing what's right. And me? Isn't it right to take care of me too? Richard looked at the woman with whom he had shared 15 years of his life and realized that he might never have really known her. Deborah, you have everything you've ever wanted. House, money, social position. Why can't you accept that I want to help someone who has nothing? Because I'm afraid of losing you. The confession, made in a broken voice, would have touched Richard's heart a few months ago. But now, after everything that had happened, it sounded more like manipulation than genuine vulnerability. Deborah, you lost me the moment you decided to use a 6-year-old child as a pawn in a power game. That night, Richard slept in the office, and for the first time in years, his dreams were about music. He dreamed of his mother singing while she worked, with Lily playing the piano in a room full of light, with melodies that connected people through time and space. When he woke up, his decision was made. Regardless of the consequences, he would not abandon Lily again. Richard's decision had immediate consequences. The next morning, even before he left for work, 2 employees from Child Protective Services appeared at his door with an official summons. Barbara had carried out her threat. "Mr. Richard Harding?" asked the older woman, showing an identification. "I'm Dr. Carroll, coordinator of Child Protective Services. You need to appear this afternoon to testify about your relationship with the minor Lily Santos." Deborah, who was having coffee in the kitchen, paled when she heard the conversation. Even though she had participated in the report, the official reality of the process frightened her. "Is it very serious?" she asked after the employees left. "Very," Richard replied, putting the summons in his shirt pocket. "You got what you wanted, Deborah. Now let's see how far this goes." The rest of the morning passed like a blur. Richard tried to concentrate on work, but his mind was completely focused on the afternoon hearing. He called his lawyer, Mr. Robert Finch, whom he had known for years for business matters. "Robert, I need you on a delicate matter." "What kind of matter?" "Child Protective Services. Someone reported me for alleged inappropriate behavior with a minor." The silence on the other end of the line was eloquent. "Richard, this is very serious. Did you do anything?" "I helped a child who was attacked and got involved with her family. Nothing inappropriate, but there are people trying to distort the situation. I'll meet you at Child Protective Services at 2 in the afternoon. And Richard, don't say anything without me present." The headquarters of Harmony Creek Child Protective Services were in a 1-story building on Elm Street, with small rooms and an institutional atmosphere that intimidated anyone. When Richard arrived, accompanied by his lawyer, he found Barbara waiting in the reception area with an expression of barely disguised satisfaction. "Richard, I'm glad you came. Mr. Finch, pleasure to meet you." The hearing was conducted by 3 counselors, including Dr. Carroll, who had made the summons. Barbara presented her case meticulously and professionally. "The facts are as follows." She began reading from a report. "Mr. Richard Harding, a 52-year-old businessman married with no children, developed a questionable relationship with the minor, Lily Santos, 6 years old, and her mother, Brenda Santos, an alcoholic known to social services." "Questionable in what sense?" interrupted Mr. Finch. "Mr. Harding spent approximately $30,000 on this family in 3 months, including medical treatment, housing, furniture, and expensive gifts for the child. He visited the minor daily, always alone, and created a harmful emotional dependency." Dr. Carroll noted everything carefully. "Mr. Harding, can you explain to us the nature of this relationship?" "I met Lily when she was attacked by a street vendor who burned her arm with a hot griddle. I took her to the hospital and, seeing the precarious conditions in which they lived, I decided to help." "Why specifically this child?" asked another counselor. "There are many children in vulnerable situations in Harmony Creek." It was the question Richard expected, and he had prepared the answer throughout the morning. "I discovered that my late mother, Eleanor Harding, had worked as a housekeeper for the family of Lily's grandmother in the 80s. There was an indirect family connection." Barbara leaned forward. "Mr. Harding, don't you find it strange that a man of your social position develops such an intense connection with a child?" Mr. Finch intervened before Richard could answer. "My client has every right to practice charity in any way he deems appropriate, as long as he doesn't break any laws. The issue isn't legality, Mr. Finch. It's the child's well-being. Excessive emotional dependency can be harmful to the minor's psychological development." The discussion continued for almost 2 hours, with Barbara presenting evidence of Richard's obsession and Mr. Finch defending his right to help whomever he wanted. But the decisive moment came when Dr. Carroll asked a direct question. "Mr. Harding, what is your long-term intention regarding the minor, Lily?" Richard took a deep breath. "I want to ensure that she has access to music education. She has an extraordinary talent that deserves to be developed. And do you intend to adopt her?" The question caught everyone off guard. Richard had never formally thought about adoption, but upon hearing the question, he realized that was exactly how he felt. If it were necessary to ensure her well-being, yes. Barbara smiled with satisfaction. There you have it, Dr. Carroll, a married man with no children who wants to adopt a child from another family. This isn't charity, it's obsession. The silence in the room was tense. Mr. Finch whispered something in Richard's ear, but he wasn't listening. His mind was processing the enormity of what he had just confessed publicly. When the hearing ended, the decision of Child Protective Services was temporary but devastating. Lily would be placed in foster care while a more in-depth investigation was conducted. Brenda, due to her history of alcoholism, would lose custody temporarily. "How long will this investigation last?" asked Mr. Finch. "It can take 3 to 6 months," replied Dr. Carroll. "It depends on the complexity of the case." Outside the building, Richard sat on the curb, his head in his hands. Everything had gone wrong. In his attempt to protect Lily, he had provoked exactly what he feared most, the separation of her from everything she knew. "Richard," said Mr. Finch, sitting down next to him, "we need to talk about strategy. This process can destroy your life if it isn't conducted properly. It already has. My wife betrayed me. I'm going to lose Lily. And now the whole town will know that I'm being investigated for inappropriate behavior with a minor. We can still reverse this, but you need to tell me everything. There can be no surprises." That night, Richard arrived home to find Deborah packing suitcases in the bedroom. She had been crying. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To Barbara's house. I can't stay here while this investigation is going on." "Deborah, you helped create this situation." "I know." Her voice was small, full of regret. "I thought Barbara was just going to scare you, make you back down. I didn't imagine it would get to this point. And now I'm scared. Scared of what people will think, scared of what this will do to our life." Richard sat on the bed they had shared for 15 years. "Deborah, you know who I am. Do you really believe that I would do anything inappropriate with a child?" "No," she whispered, "but other people don't know me like you know me. And in the end, the truth doesn't matter. What matters is what people believe." After Deborah left, Richard was alone in the silent mansion, thinking about the irony of the situation. He had tried to save a child from a cruel fate and ended up destroying the lives of everyone involved, including hers. His cell phone rang. It was Brenda, and her voice was desperate. "Mr. Harding, they took my daughter." "I know, Brenda. I just left the hearing." "Where did they take her? No one told me anything." "To a foster family. It's temporary." "Temporary? How long? She's scared. She doesn't know these people." Richard closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every decision he had made in recent months. "Brenda, I'm going to do everything in my power to bring Lily back to you. You promised you would protect her. And I promise again, I won't give up." But as he made that promise, Richard wondered if he still had the power to fulfill it. The war he had tried to avoid had finally exploded, and the first victims were exactly the people he most wanted to protect. The first signs that Richard's life was collapsing came on the Monday following the hearing. When he arrived at the factory, he found 3 of his largest clients waiting in the reception area to cancel contracts that represented almost 40% of the company's revenue. "Richard," said Mark Simmons, owner of a chain of clothing stores, avoiding eye contact, "we need to talk about our partnership." "What kind of talk, Mark?" "The kind that involves business reputation. You know how things are in a small town. Rumors run fast, and my clients are mostly conservative families." Richard felt his blood run cold. "What rumors?" "About your situation with Child Protective Services. People are talking, Richard, and I can't afford to have my brand associated with that kind of controversy." One by one, the clients presented the same embarrassed excuses. Everyone understood his situation. Everyone was sure it was a misunderstanding, but no one wanted to risk their reputations by maintaining business with a man being investigated for inappropriate behavior with minors. In a matter of 3 days, Richard lost 60% of his client base. The factory he had built for 20 years was on the verge of bankruptcy, and he knew exactly who was behind the smear campaign. On Thursday, he had the confirmation he needed when his accountant, Joseph Alvarez, requested an urgent meeting. "Richard, I received calls from 3 banks today, all questioning the company's situation and suggesting a review of our financing agreements." "Who's calling the banks?" "I can't prove it, but all the calls mention specific information about your personal life that only someone close could know." Barbara. She wasn't just trying to keep Richard away from Lily, she was systematically destroying his life to ensure he didn't have the resources to fight back. That night, Richard drove to the house where Lily had been placed. It was a middle-class residence in the Greenfield neighborhood, with a well-kept garden and a welcoming appearance. He parked across the street and watched through the illuminated windows. He could see Lily sitting at the dining table with a family he didn't know, a middle-aged couple and 2 teenage children. She was eating silently, not interacting with anyone, an empty expression on her face that broke his heart. When the family got up from the table, Lily remained seated, looking out the window. For a moment, her eyes met his through the distance, and she waved shyly. Richard waved back, feeling tears burn his eyes. His cell phone rang. It was Mr. Finch. "Richard, I need to see you urgently. Come to my office now." When he arrived at the lawyer's office, he found a man he didn't recognize waiting in the room. He was someone his age, thin, with simple but clean clothes. "Richard," said Mr. Finch, "this is Mr. Anthony Ferguson. He has important information about Barbara Santos." Anthony stood up to greet him. "Mr. Harding, I've worked at City Hall for 15 years in the accounting department. I couldn't stand to be silent about what Dr. Barbara has been doing anymore." "What kind of thing?" "Misappropriation of funds intended for social assistance programs. She has created fictitious families in the system and diverted the benefits to personal accounts. I've documented more than $100,000 in irregularities in the last 2 years. Mr. Finch handed Richard a folder full of documents. Anthony brought concrete evidence. "Copies of checks, spreadsheets, false reports. It's enough to sue Barbara for corruption and embezzlement." Richard flipped through the papers, feeling a mixture of relief and disgust. "Why are you telling me this now, Anthony?" "Because I've known the Santos family for years. The girl Lily doesn't deserve to be used in a war between adults. And because I'm tired of seeing dishonest people taking advantage of those who really need help." It was the weapon Richard needed to fight back, but using it would mean descending to Barbara's level. It would mean turning an innocent child into the center of an even uglier battle. "What happens if I report Barbara?" "She's removed from office immediately," replied Mr. Finch. "The investigation against you loses strength because the main accuser would be discredited. And there's a good chance you'll regain custody of Lily for Brenda. And if I don't report it, the investigation continues. Barbara retains the power to harm you indefinitely, and you probably lose Lily forever." Richard put the documents in the folder and took them home. He spent the entire night in the office, looking at the evidence of Barbara's corruption and thinking about the consequences of his choices. The next morning, he made a decision that would change everything again. Instead of reporting Barbara immediately, he called her. "Barbara, we need to meet today." "About what?" "About a proposal you won't be able to refuse." The meeting was scheduled at a coffee shop in the center of town, away from curious ears. Barbara arrived punctually, her confident posture poorly masking the curiosity about what Richard might want. "Get to the point, Richard. I have a busy schedule." Richard placed the folder on the table between them. "Do you recognize this?" Barbara opened the folder, and her face gradually paled as she flipped through the documents. When she finished, her hands were trembling slightly. "Where did you get this?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that I have evidence, enough to put you away for the next 10 years. This is blackmail. This is justice. You've been stealing money meant for needy families for years, Barbara. Money that could have helped hundreds of kids like Lily. Barbara tried to maintain her composure, but Richard could see the desperation growing in her eyes. What do you want? I want you to drop the charges against me. I want Lily back with her mother, and I want you to disappear from our lives forever. And if I do that, these documents stay locked in my safe. You resign your position citing personal reasons and vanish from Harmony Creek. I never hear from you again. Barbara was silent for several minutes, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she spoke. You don't understand what you're doing, Richard. Lily might not be safe with Brenda. The woman has serious problems with alcohol. Then we'll help her solve those problems, the right way, without blackmail or manipulation. And if Brenda relapses, what if she harms her daughter? Then we'll face that situation when it happens. But at least it will be a decision based on real facts, not on personal vengeance. Barbara drank the last of her coffee, her hands still trembling. You're asking me to give up everything, my career, my reputation, my life here. You should have thought of that before you started stealing money from the poor. The silence between them was charged with tension. Richard knew he was playing a dangerous game, but it was the only way to protect Lily without completely destroying the lives of everyone involved. I need time to think, Barbara said finally. You have until noon tomorrow. After that, I take these documents straight to the district attorney. That night, Richard received an unexpected call. It was Deborah. Richard, Barbara told me about your meeting today. And she's desperate. She's talking about fleeing the city tonight. Let her do what she wants, as long as she drops the charges first. Richard, she's my sister. I can't let you destroy her life. Deborah, your sister destroyed her own life the moment she decided to steal money meant for needy children. I'm just offering her an honorable way out. And if she doesn't accept your proposal... Richard looked out the window of his empty house, thinking of Lily sleeping in a strange bed, far from everything she knew. Then we'll find out who really cares about the well-being of the children in this town. Barbara's response came in a way Richard didn't expect. The next morning, when he arrived at Robert Finch's office to await the deadline, he found the lawyer with a worried expression. Richard, we have a problem. Barbara hasn't fled the city, but she's done something worse. What did she do? She anticipated our move. She turned herself into the district attorney this morning, confessed to the embezzlement, but claimed that you were blackmailing her to drop a legitimate complaint against inappropriate behavior with a minor. Richard felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. She surrendered to frame me? Exactly. Now you're not just being investigated for inappropriate behavior, but also for blackmail and extortion. It's a federal crime, Richard. You could get 2 to 8 years in prison. The malevolent brilliance of Barbara's plan was impressive. She had turned her own corruption into a weapon against Richard, admitting a lesser guilt to implicate him in something much worse. What's our legal situation now? Complicated. District Attorney Mark Simmons is taking the case very seriously. He's scheduled a hearing for tomorrow, and there's a real possibility you'll be held without bail. Richard sat down heavily in the chair. In a matter of weeks, he had gone from a respected businessman to a criminal suspect, all for trying to help a 6-year-old girl. Robert, I need to see Lily before tomorrow's hearing. Richard, that would be extremely unwise. Any contact with the minor now could be interpreted as an attempt to influence a witness. I don't care. If I'm going to be arrested, I want to say goodbye to her properly. That afternoon, Richard returned to the house where Lily was staying. This time, he didn't stay in the car watching from afar. He knocked on the door and introduced himself to the Foster family. Good afternoon. I'm Richard Harding. I'd like to speak with Lily, if possible. The woman who answered the door, Mrs. Marta, about 50 years old, recognized him immediately. Her expression was one of surprise, mixed with discomfort. Mr. Harding, I don't know if this is appropriate. Please, just 5 minutes. I need to explain some things to her. Lily! called Mrs. Martyr. "You have a visitor!" When Lily appeared in the doorway, Richard's heart broke. The girl had lost even more weight. Her eyes were dull, and she moved with a slowness that was unnatural. "Mr. Harding," she said, but her voice was without emotion. "Hi, kiddo. How are you?" "I'm fine." But it was obvious she wasn't. Lily didn't run to hug him as she always did. She kept her distance, as if she had learned that showing affection could have painful consequences. "Lily, can I talk to you in the backyard?" Mrs. Martyr hesitated, but eventually agreed. 5 minutes, no more. In the small backyard of the house, Richard knelt down to be at Lily's height. "Kiddo, I need to explain some important things to you. Did you come to get me?" The simple question was like a stab in the heart. "I can't get you now, Lily. The people who take care of these things think it's better for you to stay here for now." "Why?" How to explain to a 6-year-old the complexities of blackmail, corruption, and criminal investigations? How to make her understand that the adult world sometimes punished those who tried to do good? "Because some people think I got too close to you. They think that's not good. But you're my friend." "I am, and I always will be, even if we can't see each other for a while." Lily finally showed some emotion, her eyes filling with tears. "Will it be a long time?" "I don't know, kiddo, but I want you to remember one very important thing. Nothing that's happening is your fault. You did nothing wrong. Then why am I away from Mommy? Why can't I play my keyboard?" Richard noticed that she had mentioned the keyboard. "Where's your keyboard?" "The lady from City Hall said it was better to leave it in the old house. That here I need to adapt without distractions." Barbara had managed to be cruel even in the smallest details. She had separated Lily not only from her mother, but also from the only thing that connected her with her passion for music. "Lily, have you been singing?" She shook her head negatively. "I don't feel like it." At that moment, Richard understood the depth of the damage that had been caused. Lily had not only lost her family and her home, she had lost her joy, her music, her essence. "Kiddo, even if you don't feel like it now, the songs are still inside you. They're waiting for you to be ready to sing them again." "How do you know?" "Because my mother taught me that true music never dies. It just sleeps sometimes, waiting for the right moment to wake up." Lily was silent for a moment, processing those words. "Mr. Harding, are you going to forget about me?" "Never. Never in my life." It was then that Mrs. Martyr appeared in the backyard door. "Mr. Harding, I need to ask you to leave. I received a call from the social worker saying that you shouldn't be here." Barbara was still monitoring his every move. Richard got up and looked at Lily one last time. "Remember what we talked about, okay?" Lily nodded but said nothing more. As Richard walked to his car, he heard a sound that made his heart race. Lily had begun to hum softly the song she always sang, the same one her mother had learned from Eleanor decades ago. It was a sign that despite everything, something within her was still alive. That night, Richard received an unexpected call. It was Brenda, and she was sober. "Mr. Harding, I got a job." "What kind of job?" "Housekeeping in a family's home downtown. It pays well, and the employer said that if I stay sober for 3 months, she'll help me get my daughter back." "Brenda, that's wonderful." "Mr. Harding, I know you're going through difficulties because of us. I want you to know that I'm not going to give up. I'm going to prove that I can be a good mother to Lily." "You've always been a good mother, Brenda. You just lost your way for a while." "Mr. Harding, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Did you really want to adopt my daughter?" The question caught him off guard. "Why are you asking that?" "Because if you did, I'd understand. You gave her more love in 3 months than she's received in her entire life. If you think it would be better for her..." "Brenda, stop. Lily needs her mother, not a replacement. My role has always been to help you two stay together, not separate you." He could hear Brenda crying on the other end of the line. "Thank you for saying that." On the morning of the hearing, Richard put on his best suit and went to the courthouse accompanied by Robert Finch. District Attorney Mark Simmons was known for his strictness, and the room was full of onlookers who wanted to witness the fall of one of the city's most prominent businessmen. Barbara was present, sitting next to the prosecutor, with the posture of someone who had done the right thing. Beside her was Deborah, and seeing his wife openly supporting the prosecution was the final confirmation that his marriage had come to an end. "Mr. Richard Harding," began the prosecutor, "you are being accused of blackmail and extortion against a public official. How do you plead?" "Innocent," replied Richard in a firm voice. "The prosecution alleges that you obtained confidential documents about administrative irregularities and used them to coerce Dr. Barbara Santos to drop a legitimate complaint of abuse against a minor. Do you confirm these facts?" Robert Finch stood up. "Your Honor, my client exercised his right to defend himself by confronting evidence of corruption that compromised the credibility of the accuser." "Dr. Finch," retorted the prosecutor, "there is a difference between legitimate defense and criminal blackmail." The hearing continued for 3 hours, with each side presenting its version of the facts. But Richard knew that regardless of the legal outcome, he had lost something much more important than his freedom. He had lost Lily. What changed the course of the hearing was something no one expected. When District Attorney Mark Simmons was about to request Richard's pretrial detention, the doors of the courthouse opened and Anthony Ferguson entered, accompanied by 3 other City Hall employees. "Your Honor," said Robert Finch, rising quickly, "we request that key witnesses be heard in this case." Judge Henry Campos, an experienced man who knew well the political complexities of small towns, authorized the testimonies. What followed was a revelation that completely transformed the narrative. Anthony approached the microphone nervously, but with determination. "Your Honor, I have worked at City Hall for 15 years, and I need to tell the truth about what I have been witnessing." "Proceed," said the judge. "Dr. Barbara Santos not only embezzled public funds, but also created a systematic scheme to harm families who questioned her methods. I have here," he raised a folder, "documents that prove she falsified reports about the Santos family specifically to harm Mr. Harding." The silence in the room was total. Barbara paled visibly. "What kind of falsification?" asked the prosecutor. "She invented episodes of negligence on the part of Brenda Santos that never happened. She created a false history of alcoholism that would justify the removal of the minor's custody. And more seriously, she orchestrated the entire situation to blackmail Mr. Harding." Robert Finch approached. "Anthony, can you explain that last part better?" Barbara knew that if she could separate Mr. Harding from Lily, he would do anything to reverse the situation. She planned to use this to get money from him, but when he found out about her embezzlement, she changed her strategy. The second employee, Carlos Henrique, from the legal department of City Hall, confirmed the information. "I have here recordings of conversations where Dr. Barbara admits to having fabricated evidence against the Santos family." The judge asked to hear the recordings. Barbara's voice echoed through the room. "That idiot businessman fell in love with the girl. We can use this. If he doesn't pay what we want, we destroy his reputation, and we still get custody of the child to manipulate other cases." The impact was devastating. Deborah covered her face with her hands, finally realizing the extent of her sister's manipulation. District Attorney Mark Simmons was visibly embarrassed to have based his case on fabricated evidence. But the most shocking revelation came from the third employee, Connie, a social worker for 20 years. "Your Honor, I need to confess something that has haunted me for months." "What is it?" "Lily should never have been removed from her mother. Brenda had problems with alcohol, but she had been in recovery for 2 months when Dr. Barbara fabricated a relapse that never happened." The judge leaned forward. "How do you mean fabricated?" "She paid people to testify that they had seen Brenda drunk in places where she had never been. I knew it was a lie, but I was afraid to contradict my superior." The room exploded in murmurs. Barbara tried to get up to protest, but the judge made her sit down. "Dr. Barbara, do you have anything to say about these accusations?" Barbara looked around the room, seeing her web of lies completely collapsing. I did what I thought was best to protect the child." "Protect by lying and fabricating evidence?" The situation was complex. Mr. Harding was creating an inappropriate dependency. "Madam," interrupted Robert Finch, "I have here testimonies from teachers, neighbors, and healthcare professionals who attest that my client's influence on Lily's life was entirely positive. The only person who saw impropriety was the accuser, who we now know had personal and financial motivations." District Attorney Mark Simmons asked for a recess to reassess the case. When the hearing resumed, his demeanor had changed completely. "Your Honor, in light of the new evidence, the District Attorney's Office withdraws all charges against Mr. Richard Harding and requests a full investigation of Dr. Barbara Santos's activities." Richard felt his legs weaken. In a matter of hours, he had gone from a possible prisoner to the victim of a criminal conspiracy, but his first concern wasn't for himself. "Your Honor, what about the situation of the minor, Lily Santos?" The judge consulted the papers. "Considering that the evidence against the biological mother was fabricated, I authorize the immediate return of the child to her family of origin." It was then that something unexpected happened. Deborah stood up in the middle of the hearing. "Your Honor, may I speak?" "Mrs. Deborah, you are not a party to this process. I am the wife of the accused and the sister of the accuser. I need to publicly apologize." The judge hesitated but authorized it. Deborah went to the microphone with tears in her eyes. "I want to apologize to my husband, to the Santos family, and especially to little Lily. I helped my sister make accusations that I knew were exaggerated because I was jealous of the attention my husband was giving to another family." Her voice broke. "Richard has always been a good man, and I let fear and selfishness blind me to that. The only inappropriate thing in this story was my behavior." The silence in the room was absolute. Richard looked at the woman he had shared 15 years of his life with and felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness to see how fear had corrupted their love. Relief to finally hear the truth. When the hearing ended, Barbara was detained to await trial. Deborah approached Richard in the courthouse hallway. "Richard, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but Deborah, you did the right thing in there. That means a lot. Does it mean you can forgive me?" Richard looked at the woman who had been his companion for so long. "I can forgive you, Deborah, but some things can't be undone. Is our marriage one of them?" "I think so." Deborah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. I just want you to know that now I see the man you really are. And I regret not having seen it before." That afternoon, Richard drove to the house where Lily was staying. This time, he wasn't just visiting her. He was picking her up. When Mrs. Marta opened the door, her expression was one of relief. "Mr. Harding, I'm so glad you're here. Lily hasn't been eating right for days. I think she knew something was happening." "Where is she?" "In the backyard, sitting under the tree. She hasn't spoken to anyone since your last visit." Richard found Lily exactly where Mrs. Marta had said. She was sitting on the grass, hugging her knees, staring into nothing. "Lily?" She looked up, and this time there was no hesitation. She ran into his arms like a child who had finally found safety. "Mr. Harding, did you really come to get me?" "Yes, kiddo." "Let's go home." "To Mommy's home?" "To Mommy's home." As they drove through downtown Harmony Creek, Lily hummed softly in the back seat. It was the first time in weeks that Richard had heard that familiar melody, and he knew it meant that music was returning to her life. "Mr. Harding," she said suddenly, "can I ask you a question?" "Sure." "Why did people do bad things to separate us?" It was a question impossible to answer completely for a 6-year-old. "Sometimes, Lily, people are afraid of things they don't understand. And when they're afraid, they make the wrong choices." But is it over now? Richard looked in the rearview mirror and saw the shy smile returning to Lily's face. It's over now. The reunion between Lily and Brenda took place at the house in Westside, the same one Richard had rented for them months ago. When they arrived, Brenda was waiting on the porch, visibly nervous. She had lost weight, her hair was better cared for, and her clothes were simple but clean. "Mommy!" Lily shouted, jumping out of the car before it even stopped completely. The hug between mother and daughter was long and filled with tears. Brenda held Lily as if she feared someone might take her away again. "My girl, my dear girl," she repeated, kissing her daughter's face. "Mommy won't let anyone take you again." Richard watched the scene from afar, respecting the intimate moment between them. When he finally approached, Brenda stood up to greet him. "Mr. Harding, I don't know how to thank you for what you did for us." "You don't need to thank me, Brenda. I'm just glad you're together again." "Sir, I want to show you something." Brenda led him inside the house, which was unrecognizable. The furniture was organized, the plants in the yard well cared for, and there was a smell of cleanliness in the air. "These 3 months have made me realize a lot of things. I see you've made important changes. Not just in the house, in myself too." Brenda showed an AA membership card. "I've been attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings for 2 months, and I got a steady job at a family's home downtown." Lily had run to her room and returned carrying the keyboard. "Look, Mommy, my keyboard is still here." "Of course it is, honey. It's been waiting for you all this time." The girl sat on the living room floor and started to play. But something was different. The music coming from the instrument was no longer just the familiar melody she always sang. She had created variations, simple harmonies, as if the time away from the keyboard had allowed her musical creativity to mature. "Lily," said Richard, impressed, "where did you learn to play like that?" "I didn't learn. The songs were stuck in my head while I was away. Now they all want to come out at once." Brenda looked at Richard with an expression of gratitude and concern. "Mr. Harding, I know you lost a lot because of us. Your company, your marriage." "Brenda, I didn't lose anything that really mattered. I discovered things about myself that I didn't know existed. Even so, I want to make a proposal." Richard sat next to Lily, who continued to explore the keyboard. "What proposal?" "I want you to be Lily's godfather. Officially. I want you to have legal rights to take care of her if something happens to me." The suggestion caught Richard off guard. "Brenda, are you sure about this?" "I am. Lily needs someone to guarantee that she will be able to develop this musical talent she has. I can give her love and care, but you can give her opportunities that I never could." Lily stopped playing and looked at the 2 adults. "What's a godfather?" "It's someone who helps take care of you along with Mommy," Brenda explained. "Someone who will always be here when we need it." "Like a family?" "Exactly like a family." That afternoon, while Lily was playing in the yard, Richard and Brenda talked about the future. They had lost 3 precious months because of Barbara's conspiracy, but now they had the chance to rebuild on more solid ground. "Brenda, I want to make you a proposal too." "What?" "I want to create an education fund for Lily, not as charity, but as an investment in her future. She needs proper piano lessons, music theory, maybe even composition." "Mr. Harding, that must cost a lot of money. My company is in trouble, it's true. I lost many clients because of the scandal. But I still have enough resources to ensure her education." It was then that Brenda made a revelation that surprised Richard. "Sir, can I tell you a secret about that song Lily always sings?" "What secret?" "My mother, Lucinda, told me a story about that song before she passed. She said she learned it from a very kind woman who worked in our house, and that woman had lost her son in a tragedy." Richard felt a chill. "What kind of tragedy?" "A car accident when the boy was a teenager. The woman said she sang that song because it was her son's favorite." Richard's blood ran cold. His mother, Eleanor, had never lost a son in a car accident. He was alive right in front of Brenda, but then he remembered something he had buried deep in his memory. "Brenda, do you know the woman's name?" "My mother called her Mrs. Eleanor." "And does she remember anything else about the son?" "She said he was a very intelligent boy who wanted to be a musician, but his father wouldn't let him. After the accident, Mrs. Eleanor sang the songs her son liked as a way to keep his memory alive." Richard was silent for a long moment. It hadn't been a physical accident. It had been an emotional accident. When his father abandoned them, his mother had lost the son she knew, the boy who dreamed of music. He had become tough, focused only on survival and financial success, completely burying his musical passion. "Brenda, I think I understand now why I felt so connected to Lily from the first moment. Because of the music. Because of what the music represents. My mother saw in Lily the son I could have been if I hadn't given up on my musical dreams. And maybe Lily is my chance to honor my mother's memory in a way I never managed to do." At that moment, Lily ran into the house. "Mr. Harding, can I show you a new song I invented?" "Sure, kiddo." She sat down at the keyboard and began to play a melody that was clearly her original creation. It was complex for a 6-year-old, but executed with a naturalness that was impressive. "Who did you make this song for?" asked Richard. "For you. It's a song about people who meet when they're sad and become happy together." The simplicity of the description touched Richard deeply. Lily had created a song about redemption, about healing through human connection, about families that are formed not by blood, but by choice. "It's the most beautiful song I've ever heard," he said, sincerely moved. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Richard and Brenda finalized the practical details of their new family arrangement. He would be officially Lily's godfather, with legal rights and responsibilities. He would help financially, but respecting Brenda's authority as a mother. "Mr. Harding," said Brenda before he left, "can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Are you going to be alone now, after the divorce?" Richard thought about the question. Technically, he would be alone for the first time in 15 years. But looking at the house where Lily was sleeping peacefully, knowing that he could visit her whenever he wanted, knowing that he would have an active role in her development, he didn't feel alone. "No, Brenda, I think I have a real family now for the first time in my life." When he arrived home, the empty mansion in Oakwood seemed smaller, less important. Richard looked around at the expensive furniture, the decorative objects that Deborah had chosen meticulously, and realized that none of it really mattered. What mattered was in a simple house in Westside, in a 6-year-old girl who transformed pain into music, in a woman who had found the strength to change her life for the love of her daughter. For the first time in months, Richard slept peacefully. 3 months after the family reunion, Richard faced the reality of rebuilding his professional life from scratch. The clothing company had lost almost all its clients during the scandal, and even with his innocence proven, business confidence would take time to return. "Richard," said his accountant Joseph Alvarez during a morning meeting, "we have 2 options. We close the company and you liquidate everything, or we risk a complete reinvention." "What kind of reinvention?" "Change of focus. Instead of traditional clothing, we can go for something more specific, more artisanal. There is a growing market for unique products, made with differentiated quality." The idea intrigued Richard. In recent months, he had discovered that financial success without purpose was empty. Maybe it was time to build something that had real meaning. "Joseph, what if we created a line of clothing for children in vulnerable situations? Quality products that were accessible to low-income families. It would be viable, but the profit would be much lower." "I don't care about lower profit as long as it's sustainable." That afternoon, Richard visited Lily as he did every Tuesday and Thursday. The girl had grown visibly in recent months, not only physically, but in musical maturity. Her compositions were becoming more sophisticated, and she had begun to invent lyrics for her melodies. "Mr. Harding," she said, running to hug him, "I have a surprise." "What surprise?" "I learned to write musical notes. Miss Rita taught me." Miss Rita was a retired musician that Richard had hired to give private lessons to Lily twice a week. The 60-year-old woman had been impressed with the girl's natural talent. "Show me." Lily picked up a music notebook and showed pages full of musical notes written by hand, still with the childish handwriting but technically correct. "Lily, this is amazing. In 3 months you're already composing and writing music. Miss Rita said I have a special gift, that it's rare for someone my age to be able to do this." Brenda appeared in the room, drying her hands on her apron. She had gained a few healthy pounds and looked much calmer. "Mr. Harding, I need to tell you some news." "Good or bad?" "Good. I received a better job offer. A family in the center of town wants to hire me as a housekeeper. The salary is almost double what I earn now." "Brenda, that's wonderful. And there's more. They have a piano at home and said that Lily can use it whenever she wants, as long as it doesn't interfere with the work, of course." Lily stopped writing music and looked at her mother with sparkling eyes. "A real piano, Mommy?" "Real, honey." It was at that moment that Richard had an idea that would change everything again. "Brenda, Lily, I want to make a proposal to you." "What proposal?" asked Brenda. "What if instead of you working for a family, you came to work with me?" "How so?" "I'm reorganizing my company. I need someone trustworthy to take care of the office, someone who understands organization and is dedicated, and Lily could take professional music lessons in New York City on weekends." Brenda was silent, processing the proposal. "Mr. Harding, I don't understand companies. You understand organization, taking care of the house, responsibility. These are exactly the qualities I need. I can teach you the rest. And if I can't do it, if I mess something up, important? Brenda, you've reorganized your entire life in recent months. You've created a routine, kept the house spotless, raised Lily with love and discipline. If you can manage all that, you can manage an office." Lily approached her mother. "Mum, lessons in New York City would be like a real conservatory." "It would be exactly that," confirmed Richard. "There's a music school there that accepts students with exceptional talent, regardless of age." That night, Brenda called Richard with the answer. "Mr. Harding, I accept the proposal, but I want to make it clear that I'm going to work for real. I don't want it to be disguised charity." "It's not charity, Brenda. It's an investment. I need someone I trust completely, and you're that person." The transition took a few weeks, but soon Brenda was working in the factory office, dealing with suppliers, organizing documents, and demonstrating an efficiency that surprised even Richard. Lily attended a private school near the factory and spent the afternoons in the office doing homework and practicing music. It was during one of those afternoons that something unexpected happened. Deborah appeared at the factory. Richard hadn't seen her since the hearing at the courthouse 3 months ago. She was different, thinner, with simpler clothes, without the expensive accessories she always wore. "Richard, can I talk to you?" "Sure. Let's go to the office." In the private office, Deborah sat down nervously. "I came to apologize again, and to tell you that Barbara was sentenced to 4 years in prison. I heard it in the news. Richard, these months have made me reflect a lot on our life together, on the choices I made." "Deborah, let me finish, please. I was wrong about everything. About Lily, about you, about what really matters in life." She paused, wiping away a tear. "You found something that I could never give you. True purpose. Deborah, we were happy for years. We were comfortable. There's a difference. I've never seen you as fulfilled as you are now." Richard looked through the glass of the office and saw Lily in the main office, showing a new composition to Brenda. "It's true. I found something I didn't know I was looking for." I want to tell you something. I started volunteering at a non-profit organization that takes care of abandoned children." The news surprised Richard. Deborah had always avoided volunteer work, claiming that she had her own responsibilities. "What motivated you to do that?" "Seeing what you did for Lily made me realize that there is joy in caring for people who really need it. I discovered that I can make a difference in the lives of children, even if I'm not a mother." "I'm glad to hear that." "Richard, I know there's no going back for us. I know I made a mistake, irreparably. But I want you to know that I finally understand who you really are." When Deborah left, Richard was thinking about the irony of the situation. It took a tragedy for both of them to discover their true vocations. At the end of the day, while taking Lily and Brenda home, the girl asked a question that made him smile. "Mr. Harding, why do you look younger now than when we met?" "Younger how?" "Happier. You laugh more, you smile more. It's like you found a song that was lost." Lily's observation was deeper than she imagined. Richard had really found his lost song, not just literally, through her compositions, but figuratively, through purpose and meaning that had been dormant for decades. "You know, Lily, I think you're right. I found a song that was lost a long time ago, and now we're going to play it together for the rest of our lives." That night, for the first time since moving into the empty mansion, Richard didn't feel alone. He had a family, he had purpose, and more importantly, he had the feeling that he was honoring his mother Eleanor's memory in the way she had always dreamed, through music and genuine care for people who needed it. 6 months after the company's reorganization, Richard was preparing for something he had dreamed of since he met Lily, her first official recital. The girl, now 7 years old, had been accepted into the Music Conservatory of New York City as a special student, attending classes on Saturdays. The event would be small, intimate, in the auditorium of the school where Lily studied in Harmony Creek. She would play 3 of her own compositions and an adaptation of the song she had inherited from her grandmother, Lucinda. Brenda had been nervous for days, going over and over the special dress she had bought for her daughter. "Mr. Harding," she said on the eve of the recital, "what if she forgets the songs? What if she gets too nervous? Brenda, Lily was born for this. She'll be fine. But so many important people are coming." The director of the conservatory, that journalist from New York who writes about music, it was true. Lily's story had attracted the attention of the specialized media. A 7-year-old child who composed complex songs and had overcome a significant trauma was exactly the kind of human story that touched hearts. On the morning of the recital, Richard woke up with a strange feeling. He had dreamed of his mother Eleanor more vividly than in years. In the dream, she was sitting next to him in the audience, smiling as Lily played the piano. When he arrived at Brenda's house to pick them up, he found Lily calm and focused, unlike her mother, who was clearly anxious. "How are you feeling, kiddo?" asked Richard. "I'm fine. The songs are all in here," she said, touching her chest. "They want to come out and meet other people." The simplicity with which Lily faced music continued to impress Richard. For her, composing and playing was not performance. It was pure communication. The school auditorium was packed. In addition to the official guests, many residents of Harmony Creek attended, curious to see the child prodigy about whom so much was being said. In the first row, Richard had reserved seats for himself, Brenda, and to his surprise, Deborah had asked if she could attend. "She's special to you, so she's special to me too," Deborah had said when she called asking to watch. When the curtains opened, Lily was sitting at the piano with a serene posture that contrasted with her age. Her light blue dress, chosen by herself, made her look even younger and more fragile. But when she began to play the first song, all the apparent fragility disappeared. Her small hands moved across the keyboard with impressive confidence, creating melodies that were technically complex but emotionally accessible. The first composition was about hope. a song she had created during the difficult days in foster care. The second was about family, inspired by Brenda and Richard. The third, more elaborate, was about transformation, about how pain could become beauty through art. But it was when she played the ancestral song, the one that connected 4 generations of women, that something extraordinary happened. Lily began with the simple melody she always hummed, but gradually added variations, harmonies, counterpoints that she had developed over the months. The music grew, evolved, became something completely new while maintaining its original essence. It was in the middle of this performance that Richard saw something that left him breathless. In the last row of the auditorium, a familiar figure had entered silently. It was an elderly woman, about 70 years old, with grey hair and simple clothes, but there was something in her posture that made him recognize her immediately. It was Mrs. Eleanor. His mother, who he had given up for dead 20 years ago, was there, alive, watching Lily play. The shock was so great that Richard almost stood up from his chair. His eyes filled with tears, his breathing became irregular. How was it possible? Where had she been all these years? Eleanor had also recognized him. Their eyes met across the distance, and she made a discreet gesture, asking for silence, indicating that she would wait for the end of the presentation to approach. Lily finished her performance with a variation of the ancestral song that left the entire audience silent for a few seconds before the applause exploded. She stood up, made a shy bow, and smiled in a way that lit up the entire auditorium. During the greetings and interviews after the recital, Richard could barely concentrate. His mind was completely focused on the woman who was waiting patiently in the back of the auditorium. When he finally managed to get rid of the social obligations, he headed to where she was. "Mom," he whispered, still not completely believing it. "My son," replied Eleanor, her hands trembling when they touched his face. "My boy, how you've grown. Where were you all these years?" "I thought that—" "I know what you thought, and it was better that way at the time." Brenda, who had observed the scene from afar, approached with Lily. "Mr. Harding, is everything all right?" "Brenda, Lily, I want to introduce you to someone very special. This is my mother, Eleanor Harding." Brenda's eyes widened. "The Mrs. Eleanor who worked in my grandmother's house?" "The same," confirmed the elderly woman, smiling. "And you must be Lucinda's granddaughter." Wow, how small the world is. Lily looked from one adult to another, trying to understand the implications of what was happening. "Grandma Eleanor, was it you who taught the song to my grandmother?" "It was, my dear, and seeing you play it today, it was like seeing the whole history of our family completed." That night, at Brenda's house, Eleanor told her story. After Richard grew up and became an adult, she had felt unnecessary in his life. When he married Deborah, she realized that her simple presence did not match the sophisticated life that her son had chosen. "I decided to move to the countryside, to a small town near Cincinnati. I worked as a caregiver for the elderly, lived a simple and peaceful life. I thought it was better to leave you free to build your own life." "But Mom, I missed you all these years. I looked for you when I could afford to hire investigators. I used my maiden name, Maria Grace. I knew that if you wanted to find me, you would, but I wanted it to be a free choice." "And why did you come today?" Eleanor smiled, looking at Lily, who was sitting on Richard's lap. "Because I heard through acquaintances that my son had found his music again, and I wanted to see it with my own eyes." "How did you know?" "Harmony Creek is small, my son. When an important businessman changes his life to take care of a talented girl, the news spreads. When I found out that the girl was playing the same songs that I used to sing to you, I knew it was more than coincidence." Lily approached Eleanor with the natural curiosity of children. "Grandma, can you teach me other songs that my Mr. Harding liked when he was little?" "I can, my dear. I have many songs stored in my memory." "And are you going to stay with us now?" Eleanor looked at Richard, a silent question in her eyes. He nodded without hesitation. If you want to, yes. I can stay. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Richard and Eleanor talked late, filling the gaps of 20 years of separation. Brenda had made coffee and left them alone, understanding the importance of the moment. "Mom, why did you really leave?" Eleanor sighed, looking at her wrinkled hands. "Because I was afraid that my humble origins would hinder your social ascent. Deborah was always polite to me, but I saw in her eyes that I didn't fit into the world you were building. You were wrong. Maybe, but at the time, it seemed like the right decision. And now I see that you have become the man I always wanted you to be. Not for the money or status, but for the kindness, for what you did for this family." Richard looked at the house around him, simple, but full of love, so different from the empty mansion where he lived. "Mom, they saved me as much as I saved them. I know, my son. I always knew you needed to find your true purpose. And now that I've found it, I don't want to waste any more time. I want you to meet your granddaughter of the heart, to help raise this special girl who brought music back to our lives." Eleanor smiled, tears in her eyes. "Nothing would make me happier." From the room came the soft sound of Lily humming in her sleep the ancestral song, the one that had connected generations and was now uniting a family that had been formed not by blood, but by love, music, and destiny. A year after the recital that brought together 3 generations, life in Harmony Creek had found a perfect rhythm that none of the unconventional family of Richard could have imagined. The house in West Side had been expanded to accommodate Eleanor, who had moved permanently to be close to her son and the family she had adopted as her own. Lily, now 8 years old, had become a local celebrity, but had not lost the simplicity that had always characterized her. Her compositions were becoming more and more sophisticated, and she had begun to give small monthly concerts in the city's cultural center, always with free admission. "Mr. Harding," she said on a sunny September morning, "I have an idea for a special project." "What project?" "I want to teach music to other children who have gone through difficult things, like I went through. Grandma Eleanor said that music heals people's hearts." The idea touched Richard deeply. During the last year, he had observed how the presence of Eleanor in Lily's life had further accelerated her musical development. The adoptive grandmother taught her not only techniques, but mainly the philosophy that music was a universal language of healing. "Lily, that's a beautiful idea. But are you sure you want to divide your time between studying and teaching?" "Yes, I am. Miss Rita said that the best way to learn is by teaching, and I want other children to feel what I feel when I play the piano." Brenda, who was preparing lunch in the kitchen, heard the conversation and approached. In recent months, she had become much more than an employee to Richard. She was a true friend, a partner in raising Lily, a chosen sister. "Honey, are you sure you're ready for this responsibility?" "Mom, when you were sad because of drinking, I sang to you to feel better. Now I want to sing to other children who are sad too." Lily's emotional maturity continued to impress everyone around her. She had transformed her own trauma into a source of empathy and a desire to help others. "You know, Lily," said Richard, "I think we can make this a reality. How about creating a music school for underprivileged children here in Harmony Creek?" Lily's eyes lit up. "A real school. For real, with instruments, teachers, and you as our little special ambassador." The idea quickly took shape. Richard had managed to stabilize his company with the new focus on quality children's clothing at affordable prices, and now he had resources to invest in social projects. The music school would be set up in an abandoned building in the city center, which they would completely renovate. Eleanor became enthusiastically involved in the project. "My son, it's as if all the songs I've sung throughout my life are coming together in a larger symphony." "How so, Mom?" "You found your music through Lily. Lily found her voice through our songs. And now we're going to help other children find their own melodies. It's a perfect circle." The inauguration of the Eleanor Harding Music School was scheduled for December, a few days before Christmas. During the months of preparation, people from all over the city volunteered to help. Deborah, who had become a constant presence in Richard's social projects, coordinated a campaign to collect used musical instruments. "Richard," she said during one of the planning meetings, "can I tell you something?" "Sure. Seeing you like this, doing something that really matters, makes me remember why I fell in love with you so many years ago." "Deborah, no, let me finish. I know there's no going back for us as a couple, but I want you to know that I'm happy seeing the person you've become, and I feel honored to be able to contribute, even from afar, to this beautiful family that you built." It was true. The family that had formed around Lily was unique and special. Richard as the adoptive father who had found purpose, Brenda as the mother who had overcome her demons, Eleanor as the grandmother who had returned to complete the circle, and even Deborah as the friend who had learned to love without possessing. On the day of the inauguration, the school was full of children eager to try out the donated instruments. Lily, wearing a special red dress for the occasion, gave a small performance that moved everyone. But the most special moment was when she invited some of the children to play along with her. Among them were Peter, a 9-year-old boy who had lost his mother in an accident; Mary, 7 years old, who lived with her grandmother after her parents abandoned her; and John, 10 years old, whose father was in prison. "Each of you has a special song inside your heart," Lily said to the children gathered around the piano. "Let's discover those songs together." What followed was magical. Lily played a simple melody and asked each child to contribute a sound, whether singing, clapping, or trying out some instrument. In a few minutes, there was an improvised orchestra of wounded children creating beauty together. Richard watched the scene with tears in his eyes, remembering the day he had heard Lily's cry in the central square. Who would have thought that that moment of pain would turn into so much joy for so many people? "My son," whispered Eleanor beside him, "your biological mother would be very proud." "Why?" "Because you learned the greatest lesson that music can teach, that our individual pains, when shared with love, are transformed into collective harmony." 6 months after the opening of the school, Lily received an invitation that changed everything again, but this time in a positive way. The Conservatory of New York City wanted her to become the youngest regular student in its history, with a full scholarship and special support. "It's a unique opportunity," explained the director during a video conference. "Lily has a talent that appears once every generation. We can enhance this in ways that are not possible in smaller schools." The family gathered to discuss the proposal. It was a difficult decision because it would mean that Lily would have to move to New York City. "I want to go," said Lily with her characteristic honesty, "but only if the whole family goes together." "Honey," said Brenda, "New York City is very expensive. We have no way—" "Yes, we do," interrupted Richard. "I can transfer the company headquarters there. Eleanor can come with us, and Brenda can continue to be my partner in the business." "Partner?" asked Brenda, surprised. "Yes, in the last 2 years you have proven to be the best administrator I've ever had. I want to formalize this. You will have a real stake in the company. The move to New York City happened at the end of the year, but it was not an end. It was a new beginning. The Eleanor Harding Music School continued to operate in Harmony Creek under the coordination of volunteers, with Lily visiting once a month to give special classes. In New York City, the family settled in a house in the Greenwich Village neighborhood, close to the conservatory. Lily flourished in the more demanding academic environment, but never lost her connection with her origins. Her compositions continued to tell stories of overcoming, of unconventional families, of love that heals wounds. At her first recital at the conservatory, she presented a special composition entitled "The Family of Music." It was a complex piece that began with a simple melody, the ancestral song that Eleanor had taught Lucinda. and gradually incorporated themes that represented each member of her chosen family. The final movement was a harmony where all the individual melodies came together in a unique symphony, representing how wounded people can heal each other through love and music. In the audience, Richard held the hand of his mother Eleanor, while Brenda wiped away tears of pride. Beside them, Deborah watched with a serene smile, happy to be part, even if tangentially, of that extraordinary family. When Lily finished playing, the silence in the auditorium stretched for several seconds before the applause exploded. But for her, the most important reaction was to see her family standing, applauding not only her music, but the journey they had all traveled together. That night, in the new house in New York City, the family gathered as they always did after important events. Lily played the piano softly while the adults talked about the future. "You know," said Richard, observing the scene around him, "sometimes I think all of this was orchestrated by a greater force." "How so?" asked Brenda. "The way we met, how my mother came back exactly at the right time, how all the pieces fit together. It's as if life is a giant musical composition, and each of us is a note that needed to find its harmony." Eleanor smiled. "I've always believed that music is the language that God uses to show us that there is beauty even in pain. And that real families," added Lily, stopping to play to look at everyone, "are those where people choose to love and take care of each other." At that moment, in the simple but loving home in New York City, 4 people who had met through pain and healed through music understood that they had created something much greater than the sum of their individual parts. They had created a family where music was not just art, but a language of love, where the scars of the past became sources of strength, where a wounded girl became a source of healing for others, and where a man who had lost his way found not only purpose, but the true meaning of home. The music that Lily played that night was new, a composition that she was creating in the moment. It had no name yet, but everyone knew that it spoke about new beginnings, about hope, about the magic of finding family in the most unexpected places. And as the notes flowed through the air of the house, carrying with them the whole story of love, loss, and reunion that had united those lives, everyone knew that this would only be the first page of a much longer symphony that they were still writing together.